Hello and welcome to GATSBY Fridays, a show about getting the best out of a creative life from two creative directors working around the world and based in New York City.
I'm your host, Alex Chamilio.
And I'm Sarah Semi.
And today we talk about our first jobs.
We'll talk about our first professional experiences, mentors and lessons learned, company culture, and what is still valuable to this day and onwards.
And at the end of each episode, we make a signature cocktail, toast cheers to you.
So hang with us as we talk about our first professional jobs. I'm your host, Sarah.
And I'm Alex. And this is GATSBY Fridays.
Alex, before we get into our conversation, let's do a check-in. How are you and what are you wearing?
I am excited. Today was a great day because we had our second photo shoot for the podcast. Holy cow. Would you have imagined that we would be having any photo shoots for this podcast?
I mean, so we're 2 months into this project. The first photo shoot was in quarantine.
Yes.
You and me with just one outfit walking around in Chelsea.
Exactly.
With just nobody on the streets. Take the mask on. Hold the phone. I take a picture of you. Hold the phone. You take a picture of me.
You held the phone, yeah. I held the phone. We found it actually worked out very well.
It was fun, but it was a little bit of a rain, so my hair got flat. I remember being like, oh my God, can we not be in the rain? It wasn't pouring, but it was just enough for a girl's hair to be bothered.
Well, this photo shoot was different because we
so
actually
good.
had a professional photographer to do our pictures. And I am wearing... So for the photo shoot, we had a couple of outfits. We had our Gatsby outfit, we had our work outfit, and we had I did an experiment, and I decided that we wanted to do a little bit of a punk rock shoot. So we had our punk rock outfit.
In Soho Streets.
In Soho Streets on Mercer. I thought it worked out very well. What did you think?
I think it was great.
Yeah.
I think it was great. It was a fun experience, and also felt like, wow. Because when we first did our first shoot, we weren't we hadn't started even recording yet, or it was so new. Now we have this grounding and this agenda for the podcast, and we have a mission. We're figuring it out along the way. But now it feels like, okay, I know I know this, but it feels like we deserve a shoot. We deserve this professional photographer.
For me, it didn't feel real until we started recording. Yes, we had a photo shoot, and it was great, but until we actually started recording, the reality started setting in that we were doing this. I am in the last outfit for the shoot that we had today, which was the rock shoot out on the street. So I'm wearing a rock t-shirt, Led Zeppelin. I'm wearing washed black blue jeans, and of course what has seemed to become my signature Jordans in pink and black. And it's a comfortable outfit. I feel great. The shoot was wonderful. Sarah, how are you? And what are you wearing?
Well, I thought I'd be really tired by now, but I'm so energized. Also, it's really late in the day now for our usual. We usually do this more earlier in the day. But after a whole day of shooting and coming back to the office, regrouping, planning this episode, I feel very energized. I feel like I'm gonna go home and crash completely for solid 10 hours.
I was gonna say, write a novel.
Well, maybe a dance party to myself. I do that now.
What do you listen to?
David Bowie.
Nice.
Modern Love. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then my latest one is Tell It to My Heart, Taylor Dane.
Tell it to my heart.
I have a playlist called The Bachelorette Karaoke. The picture it is, everybody's bachelorette is so cheesy in my mind. No offense to any of my friends, but I was if I'm gonna do karaoke, that's what I want for karaoke. And for some reason, I always end up in karaoke for bachelorette parties. So the idea was it came out from that. But David Bowie, Toto Africa.
Oh my God.
Taylor Dane. It's every now and then I go to a store, I hear this one song, and I'm like, oh my God, that totally belongs in my bachelorette karaoke. And that's
wow.
That's what I come home to and be like, they don't play that where I hang out. I just play that and dance a little.
That is awesome.
That's the new me. I don't know. So no, I'm gonna crash when I go home. But I wore a whole bunch of different outfits today, but I rushed here with my yoga pants and a loose linen tank top, which I switched back to once the photo shoot was over.
What was your favorite outfit of the day?
Favorite outfit of the day.
Favorite look of the
You know,
day.
my favorite thing is that white silk shirt always with white sneakers, and those have been my signature look the past 2 years. Just and black shiny denim.
You had on those rocking jeans
I love those jeans.
and the booties.
Well, the booties were on the street.
No, those were nice though.
Oh, they were very comfortable too. So that was a good day. So I feel good. Alex, tell me about your very first professional job interview. Like, I'm not talking about what you did in college. You know, I worked in the computer labs. I interviewed in her office. Like, not that. Like, when you first did the job that you were trained to do, that's going to be your career. How was that interview?
So,
What did you wear? How did you walk in?
oh my goodness, wow! What did I wear? Are we talking official jobs or are we talking internships?
Both. I think like my
Okay.
first real like I mean I remember my first internship interview. So
Okay.
start with yours.
So I did many internships. I did a couple. But one of the more significant internships that I remembered doing was for a designer that I really admired, and she had since passed away actually a couple of years ago. But she was truly an innovator, and I remember walking into her offices that were on Fifth Avenue and 29th Street, between 29th and 28th Street. And it was on the second floor, and it's, of course, one of these elevator buildings where the elevator leads you into the design studio. And there were offices to the left, and there were the cutting tables, and she was there, and you know, this is gonna sound like a cliche, but it's almost seems as if a ray of light beamed and shone right down on her, and she was immaculate. And so for this internship, it was a fashion internship. So when she saw my portfolio obviously geared towards fashion, but there was that towards the end of it was art work, which she gravitated towards more, and it was computer artwork. And this was at the time where kind of computer generated artwork and Photoshop and Illustrator was a kind of a new thing.
Yeah, it was more rudimentary.
Very shaded shapes, basically. And solar
Oh yeah.
effects on your
The
art.
90s like scientific like NASA look.
So 90s. But she gravitated towards that, and that was really cool. I started working there as soon as she okayed me being there.
What were you wearing?
Oh man, you know, I could
Like, do
only
you remember even?
I could barely remember, but I could only imagine, you know, you have an idea in your head as a guy on what you're supposed to be wearing: a clean white shirt, a tie, and slacks. So I'm sure I was wearing oversized pleated khaki slacks and a white shirt. Fashion student, go figure, right? But you know, the job was actually really tough because fashion works reverse seasons. So we were working on fall and winter in the summer. And I remember one time I had to pick up fabric for her, and it was velvet. And I had to carry these bolts of velvet from the garment center back to her studio. And these were just these huge, enormous rolls, and it was August, and I was sweating. And I thought, this is the worst thing I could possibly do. But being in the studio with her was absolutely incredible. I truly believe that she was one of these designers that made the world go around. And probably I could count them on one hand. There are probably 5 designers who could do that in fashion, and she was truly one of them.
Wow, that's high praise.
Yes. She was really good. She taught me how to cut properly, which was something that
What did you say her name was again?
Isabel Toledo.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Isabel Toledo was the designer, and her husband, Ruben Toledo, is a very well-known illustrator, and they lived together in this amazing penthouse overlooking Broadway, and he had his art studio there, and she also had her atelier just at the bottom of at the ground level of the building.
I want that life.
It was fabulous. I mean, they truly had the life that I've wanted, that I thought I wanted when I was younger.
Yeah, I can see that. I want that life now. I'll take it.
And what was your first interviews like, or what was your first job experience like?
I mean, I did some internships back in Turkey at McKinney Erickson, but those, like my parents knew the GM, and like, it was just like I didn't interview, I just showed up. That's not the same. So for me, I was in school in New Orleans, and I applied to a bunch of jobs, and for some reason, G&G was one of the companies listed in Tulane University.
G&G for?
G&G stands for Graham Gustafson. It's the design agency we keep talking about that you and I met, and it's just they're not global or anything. Like, they just had someone that worked there at some point decided to list the position at Tulane. I just happened to stumble upon it, so I applied, and I wanted it so bad. But then along with that, I had 2 interviews in New York. So my dad was like, do you really need to fly to New York? And I was like, well, if I need to get a job in New York, I need to get an internship in New York. And to get an internship, you have to show up for the interview. And he's like, well, okay then. Because he was like, why? Why is this going to cost so much?
You have to be there.
I flied out, and my first internship interview was at Mark Communications. I don't think they even exist anymore. Back then, they were designing Talbots and Macy's like mail order catalogs. It's a little bit more corporate. I remember I got along with the guy who was like running the internship so well. Like, I mean, whoever's running the interview so well. I remember like there was this meeting room, and he showed me the meeting room. And then when we were walking out, I said, do you want me to turn the lights off? My dad was so proud when I told the story, because he was like, I left that on as a test for you. Because the idea is that even as an intern, you need to own things. Like, I'm just there interviewing. Like, I was like, do you want me to turn the light off or not? Like, that was just like, my dad was like, see? Every time I would leave a room, my dad would make me, like, turn the lights off. So that was just kind of like a joke. And the second day was at G&G. So I get on to, like, and I have no idea where, like, downtown finance logistics versus downtown Lafayette and 4th would, the difference of it. Like, I spent like 2 days in Thanksgiving in New York when it was dark outside. So like no reference to understanding the hipness of the neighborhoods or anything. I just understand, that was a corporate office, and I was like so like mesmerized because it's the first time a corporate office gave me an interview. And then I get on this really old school brass button elevator on 4th and Lafayette. There's some guy in there, and he's like, are you? And I press 4, and he's like, are you going to G&G? And I'm like, yeah. And then this guy interrupts the door, says something, and then leaves. And he goes, you realize who that is? That's one of the owners. And I was like, oh my God, I already met one of the owners. And like, I didn't mean. He just like interrupted because it turns out the guy that was in the elevator was his son. No. And then we get off. He just like goes away. And I just like, the same way that you're describing like this light shined on her, I get to this like, the gates of heaven opened up. It's like, oh. This elevator opens into this insanely big loft, high ceilings, and it's like this gallery space of brands. It's like tabletops filled with stuff, and then posters and large things and spotlights. And then you walk in to your right, there was this big TV, and there was already a design meeting there, and you were sitting in it. I just didn't know you then. I remember the creative director, I remember seeing him because he was tall and he was standing. And I walk all the way to the back because I was told after I checked in with the receptionist to go all the way to the back to one of the partners' office.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember sitting down there, and he goes like, he looked at my portfolio. My portfolio is all fine arts. Like, I had no design experience, nothing whatsoever. And he was like, you realize this is an unpaid position, right? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, that's not my criteria. And he goes, what is your criteria? It's like, you give me the job, I'll work for you. And I was like so nervous, and I was like shaky, and I come out, and I was wearing this. That winter when I was back home, we went to this like slightly more designery shop in Istanbul for a skirt with a really high slit for, it was still not like a nerdy outfit for me, like, and a really look baggy blazer jacket because it needed to look proper at the end. And then with that, there was a dress combo. So I wore the skirt the day before. So I was like, well, it's not like they saw it, but you feel like, I'm going to wear the dress version now. So I was wearing this like black, like almost like, I don't know, blazer fabric dress with a little leather belt and a full-on blazer. But it was so ill-fitting. I was small. The smallest they had was like, but that was the only thing like I was like okay to buy because I needed a suit to go into interviews.
That's the thing.
So
Yeah.
I remember that, and I was like, I had these really cheap, bad heels. These I was like, I don't like anything. The things that I like were like, you know, I'm on the student budget. I didn't want to like spend it. I remember being like, this is such an awkward. And I walk in and you guys are just like wearing your casual clothes. I was just like, what I wore, it would have been like maybe a local bank somewhere. So like just the idea that I walked into this space and I was like, oh my God, I don't care what anything is. I just want to work here. This would have been like the most amazing thing that happened to me if they hired me. So I just remember that feeling of like, I want to be in here. I belong in here. At my heart, I hope they see that kind of thing. That was my very first 2 interviews back to back. I flew up to New York for, and I got the internship at both of them. Of course, I picked.
It took 2 interviews?
No, like two different companies.
Ah, okay.
So I got the job and I started that summer. So I think this was like maybe in March of my junior year, and I was there the summer. That's when you and I met.
Yeah.
That was my first interview. I think it's really funny, like how uncomfortable you are in those like, you know, ill-fitting outfits because you're so young, nothing really fits. You're in between like, you know, kids and adult.
You're not sure what to wear.
You're not sure what to wear. Like, you know, what I wore was fine, but it was so not what the company culture is, you know, like it's just a very different reality. Like, and I come from not from an art school. So, like, they train you, like, you know, you wear your suit, you type your resume on a typewriter, and then you type your labels and kind of thing. So, it's just very it's funny to reflect back on it and be like, wow. But you know in your gut, like, you knew the Toledo office was the place to be. Like, you walk in there and you know in your gut, I wanted to be there. And it has basically defined my entire, not only my career, but also my personal life as well. When we get back, we will talk about your first job offer. This is Gatsby Fridays.
Sarah, let's talk about your first job offer. What was it, and how did you negotiate the job?
Well, my first job offer was from my internship. So when I graduated, they didn't like on their own extend me a job. But I applied to, I sent so many resumes to every single agency I could find. And this is like, you know, pre-Monster days. Like maybe Monster was just starting.
Yeah.
Like there was like these advertising directories and the schools would have them, like the career departments would have them, like very old school. And like you would like mark which ones you want, like wrote down the address. I sent so many resumes, didn't get anything back. But to a point where it was like my parents were like, well, you know, did you ask the place where you intern? And I was like, no. They're like, just ask them. I was like, so nervous. I call them like, hi, I need a job. I'm graduating. So I tried, and they were like, well, we don't really have anything for you right now. Well, my dad made me call them again. So after that, I remember I got a call back from the creative director. And it was it was right around my graduation because my parents were in New Orleans and we were downtown New Orleans. I have a photo. My mom took it. I was on the phone. I had a cell phone back then. I was on the phone talking and she took a picture of me because they said, listen, we will have a job for you, but it will not pay enough to support yourself in New York. Mm-hmm. So you have to be prepared to supplement that. So I was like, okay, and I hung up, and my parents were like, well, that's better than no job. Get started. So I was lucky enough that my parents supported me when I forgot my first job, but that was like, there's no negotiation, because if I said no, they weren't going to give me a job, and then no one else was giving me any other job either. So in my parents' mind, and I agree with that instead of coming to New York completely jobless, interviewing, it meant more sense to start at a place where they already knew who I was, and we already knew how we connected, and I knew what to expect out of it in terms of the job. And I loved my summer internship. Like, I came back just still dreaming about it. So it was just the right moment for me. So there was no negotiation. The problem with that was being on an immigrant visa, I only had 1 year under those terms. After that, they had to pay me the minimum the government declared for my position. and apply for an H-1B visa, which they resisted it in the beginning because it meant a 25% raise from what they initially agreed to for the first year. I was just grateful that they okayed that increase and got me the visa. So I didn't really I was always been like, oh my God, I'm so grateful for the opportunity. So I don't need to ask anything else of you mentality, which kind of I don't agree with anymore. I always feel like now, and I know better, in retrospect, I should never put myself in a position of always be grateful and always be gracious, but I could have still had asked for things. I never asked for a raise. I didn't get a raise for 4 years, but it's also, I should have asked. I should have known to ask. I was too scared to just jeopardize any immigration status I had. So I've learned a lot from that, I think. Immigration changes how you negotiate your job offers, basically. What was your first job offer?
I started working, so officially after I got my degree and spent a year actually looking for work after school. I got a job in fashion, finally. I still remember the address, 725 Broadway. This was at J. Crew.
See? You remember the first details.
I do. I remember.
21 East 4th Street. See?
There you go. You always remember the address. And I remember walking into a really clean, enormous white space, whitewashed wood floors. There was a reception area. I met with the director at the time of menswear, oddly enough, but my job was actually working in the women's department, designing intimate apparel. Now, that's a misnomer because I actually was not designing the actual undergarments. I was designing the prints and the patterns that went on said garments. I don't know why I did that. The job didn't last too long, only just a couple of years, but I did meet really, 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 really cool people there. I got to meet Jenny Lyons, who went on to become the face of J. Crew for X years to come.
Yeah.
I don't believe she's with the company anymore. But I got to meet really good friends there that I still maintain those relationships with. Value that. It was a good stepping stone to see what a huge fashion corporation, how that runs. A lot of moving parts, a lot of people, a lot of hierarchy, fast-paced, but it was good.
It's funny that you pivoted to a smaller agency at a time then where I met you, because that is definitely the exact opposite of corporate environment, which I benefited greatly from. I was,
They had a fashion. G&G definitely had a fashion component.
Well, it was mostly fashion branding.
And it was branding, and that was actually an area that I had a lot of interest in.
But also, they believed that the fashion branding wasn't just like what you stick on the clothing, but they would, depending on the commitment of the client. But they were there were at times fashion designers designing new lines to improve the brand itself in-house.
And they were committed to a lifestyle concept within a fashion identity. So it wasn't just designing the branding, it was everything that was associated with the branding.
I think that's why all of a sudden, when I learned that in my internship, that changed my perspective about the industry immensely, because I thought that I was going to work in advertising because that's all I thought, that was a creative, lucrative, creative career. And then I get into G&G, did this internship where I learned, guess what? The advertising agencies are going to sell what we design here. And without what we give them, they wouldn't have something, you know what I mean? The advertising agency, unless it's there's a special branding department within it, especially this is also 20 years ago, the branding concept was different. Smaller branding agencies were a little newer than now. It's everywhere. I just remember finally grasping that oh my God, I've landed at the right spot, that this is so much more inspiring than creating an ad for me.
And companies, especially where we worked, would take on clients that didn't necessarily have a fashion component to it. I remember one project that was the radio flyer project, and how they approached G&G to develop a children's wear concept and a children's wear line, but not only just the clothing and accessories that went along with it, but also the using the iconic wagon as a stepping stone to design not just the merchandise but store fixtures.
I mean, that sounds like
store
a dream
components.
project.
It was pretty awesome. I thought it was great because I would come in, you know, getting paid to walk into a place to just think of ideas that get made.
That's pretty
is
awesome.
pretty incredible, and to get made in metal.
That's pretty awesome.
It was pretty amazing. And they developed a lot of these store fixtures, a lot of these hanging structures for the clothing.
I mean, and while doing that, I think the thing that I picked up that still serves me to this day is you walk into this gallery space, and they called it a gallery space, but presenting the brand idea wasn't just a PowerPoint. We built these immersive experiences where there was wall size photos printed, there was a big plotter printer in there because they knew that we needed to constantly print wall size graphics to make that impact. And just you want to show a metal fixture, you print it out and you placed it on a metal piece, and then you still mocked it up. There was this extra heightened level of, we weren't product designers there, but we were creating this feel. So if you are designing this lifestyle brand, you walked into that space and you felt like you were part of it, and physically being in front of that is so much more impressive than a PowerPoint.
Absolutely. What they were able to accomplish was making sure that you understood the three-dimensional world that they were trying to portray.
And those those skills to do that level of mocking up, I picked up there. That's what got me into grad school. That's what made me finish grad school. That still to this day gives me this idea, we're designing a podcast. It is not just a sound file.
No.
It is this entire existence. Also, it's harder now because it's completely digital, which is what, grad school was for me. That enabled me to take that idea of immersiveness and learn how to do it in new tools. But just the fact that we're creating this entire experience, it's not just us talking. We create this world around it, and that still stems from that experience of my first job. I got lucky enough to pick those skills up and that perception, that methodology along the way.
Even though we are working in a digital medium, it's still those skills that we learned there, and I'm going to refer back to the hand skills. And knowing how to work with materials with your hands still plays a role now. I mean, I think there is a quality to our website that has a hand feel to it.
Yeah.
And that stems from that training.
Absolutely.
And there's more than just the digital aspect of what you do. There is texture, there's nuance and depth into the design that we do for the podcast, that I remember learning then.
Yeah, I mean, of course, over the last 15 years, we built on it, and, you pick up skills and stuff, but it definitely was rooted at that first job and then learning from people I worked with, like you, but also the company culture is also, I got to work with people I made lifelong friends with. I have other friends that I met there. My first internship, still to this day, one of my best friends. And the rest of my friends came from her. It just literally set me up for life. I walked into that studio, and all of a sudden my life took a very big turn. And I've been down that road since. Of course, I've only worked there for 4 years, but
4 years is still a long time.
I mean, especially at that age, also, very formative age, first job out of college kind of thing. But I learned so much in terms of how to build things that's what the portfolio that got me into grad school. I learned how to make handbooks there. And I remember when I was doing printmaking classes in college, they would tell us, you could order this little, the beeswax and this and the paper and the special glue and all this stuff.
To make actual books.
To make actual handmade books. So it was just one part of an entire semester, 2-week segment of an entire semester's curriculum. And then I got the G&G, and then we were making books, accordion books that are gigantic, coffee table size books. And then there was archival linen tapes and special materials and, you know, the printing quality because we had so much, like, capability there. But I learned, what was that bookstore?
Tallis.
Tallis.
Tallis. I knew it was coming up. I know, on
It was
Broadway.
on Broadway and Prince.
7.
No, it's on Broadway and Prince.
Oh, Prince. Okay.
I was
it's
on the
remembering
second
the
floor
address
of
though.
where
720.
I don't remember the address, but I remember it was like that corner used to be Armani Exchange,
Yes.
and then on the second floor there's a Bliss Spa, and then there's this like old school place that sells like archival glue and linen tapes, and like, and then I come back to like printmaking class the next semester, and I'm like, well, I have all this like good stuff to work with now. It's like I still like. The book that you brought me about, like from 20 years ago, that was like in your collection for our book episode. It comes from that first internship, but like even now, like 20 years later, the hand skill of like those perfect corners and seamless cuts and the fabric inside and the tabs, that level of handmade perfection. I mean, clearly, like you already have to have the inclination to be able to do that. Not everyone holds the scissors the same way, but I learned that level of perfection in my hands exists because they expected it of me, and I did it.
Hello, and welcome back to GATSBY Fridays. Sarah, tell me about the office culture at your first job. Now, I know
you were there.
We worked at our first jobs together, your first job together.
Yes.
So we're just going to really just talk about the culture in that specific job.
And we reminisced enough.
Oh my goodness.
Last episode talking about the city, but this, I mean, again, I can keep like, you know.
We literally stood in front of the building and
yeah,
spoke about it.
So
now we're going to go into more detail, I think.
Honestly, I got very lucky with that company. Looking back on it, I think the owners and the creative director knew who to hire and bring really talented people together and really flourish that environment. Coming from a place where I didn't have a graphic design background, I learned how to use Illustrator and Photoshop at that job. It wasn't a problem. Well, also, this is like, again, 15 years ago, so it wasn't a requirement because the software was so expensive that very few people had access to it. But also, schools did, and I didn't come from a graphic design school, so I didn't know it, but they didn't care. They just wanted me to show initiative, and that's where I learned that word also. I remember one of my best friends now, when I starting this summer, and the owner walked past us and be like, remember to take initiative, guys. And I remember thinking that, wow, what a big word.
You would say that often.
But I know, but it's, you know what? It's a good word. But I also did, so there was the brand that we were working on that summer, this Latin American fashion line. We were doing there was a fashion designer in the house that was doing the line illustrations. And then they wanted a watercolor feel to it. So that was my job. I painted. Basically, it was like fill in the colors kind of painting. I was given these lines, and I was making sure that, if he said it was like a blue and white stripe. One of the senior designers, Eric Z, coming up and be like, what you doing? How about you make it a little looser? You're controlling it too much. I would be like, why don't you just loosen your hand a little bit? I swear to you, that hand looseness he taught me, whatever he did, I don't remember, it's been 15 years, that he engraved in my brain, I did not learn in any of the watercolor classes I have taken since, and I've taken plenty at different places. And I love some of them, but that looseness of the wrist, that when it comes to illustration and painting, I learned it from him. And it was just so casually, like, oh, let me show you what you can do. There was that type of everyone showed me how to do what I needed to do there. Let me show you a better way of how to do that. No one said, oh, you're doing it wrong. And that was a very benevolent, working environment, to the point where I got to grad school, and Art Center being one of the top design institutions in the world, it was cutthroat competition. I did not see it coming. There were 10 of us in that classroom, and I was like, well, I'm coming from New York City. I'm fine. And they were mean moments where I would just be like, where did that come from? I didn't think, it's okay kind of thing. So I didn't really, until I left the place, I didn't realize how much of a support and educational, like supportive environment I'd been in. She would show me how to mask things, and then the other senior designer would show me how to do the textures, and this is how you use bitmap TIFFs and stuff like that. No one cared. Like, it wasn't about like, oh, if you learn too much, you'll take my job. There was none of that stupidness. So I got very lucky in terms of not only the company was really visionary in what they were doing, but also people who were working there, that the people who they put together, like you and me, lifelong friendship. I also have other friends that I've made friends with there. That's something that I still carry on. Like, when I look at people that I want to work with, it's not just you're here for this job and you're gone the next day. It's, you look at it as an investment of a lifelong, what does this mean, in a way. The company culture was great. There was also happy hours after work.
I remember the design competitions.
Ooh,
that were
the
among
design
the
competitions.
designers. You were there, I think, at that times. I mean, the design competitions encompass more than just graphic design, but competitions. And I remember we would be. It's funny because here's the thing: we're in an office, we're already working doing this design work, and yet we still found the creative energy amongst all these creative people to do competitions amongst ourselves, totally separate from the company. And those were some of the most fun projects. We were making all these books by hand, and then one day, senior designer walks up to me and says, "You know what? You make a book. Any book you want to make. I'm going to make a book, and let's see who has the best book."
So, I can picture him saying that.
And and this is funny because this is during our own time. Like, after work.
Yeah, you stay work.
You stay at work later.
Well, that's also
was
very generous that we were allowed to stay work and use the space
for
and the resources as long as we were being creative. Yeah, and you took care of the space and you took care of it as of your own.
Of course, you respected the space, of course. But I remember those design competitions, and those were great. I mean, here's the thing: we would design books, we would design flyers, we would design posters.
Hot sauce competition.
And one of the biggest ones was the hot sauce competition, and that was fabulous. Now, I think, Sarah, you need to explain what the hot sauce competition is.
Multiple levels. There's best tasting,
because
you also had to cook your hot sauce. It wasn't just the design. So there was 4 categories, clearly. Best in show, but best tasting hot sauce.
Most hot.
Hottest, and then the best packaging.
And 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And then the 4th one would be the best in show.
Yes.
I did win best packaging once, and I was so proud that it was not about cooking. It was more like, I'm among these designers, and my packaging won. Like, my design won. Like,
what was your packaging again?
So I called it Spray and Burn, and I put it in a spray bottle, and I made a label that mocked, what was it, Spray and Wash or whatever, some sort of like a stain fighting detergent label kind of thing. It was like pink and neon green, and I made it and I also, while I was making these hot sauce competitions, I burned my eyes several times. I wear contacts, and no matter how much you wash your hands, that stays in your fingers. I have
for days.
2 years in a row. I couldn't put my contacts in for 2 days. Like, it was nightmare. Lessons learned. There was also not enough internet for you to, you couldn't just Google, like, how to make hot sauce and get the warnings, like, wear rubber gloves. It wasn't,
True.
The information was there, but it was a lot harder to get at.
Very limited at best.
Burnt my eyes so many times. But I was so proud that among professional designers, because I was learning on the job. I didn't have a design degree. I was learning with them. I was learning from them that I want the design aspect of it. I didn't care about the recipe. That was so much fun. Once a year, everyone would make this hot sauce. We would go to a bar. There would be an arrangement with the bar, whatever, the venue. There would be only hot sauce and chips to taste the hot sauce.
Maybe pieces of bread.
Maybe a bread, depending on the bar, if they were able to supply it, if we were allowed to bring it. I remember I went to grad school in LA, and I came back, and they were still going on, and I remember showing up to 2 of those even after that.
I remember making... I designed a hot sauce, and I remember sourcing the bottle.
Yes, I had to find a spray bottle. And I remember
sourcing the bottle, and I wanted a vintage glass bottle because... My hot sauce was called the Flaming Gentleman, and it had a very dandy label.
So appropriate.
But But the bottle, I remember going to so many like flea markets in Chelsea, and you remember when Chelsea had the flea market
I
under the garage?
remember 23rd and something.
It-
Yep.
And I found the perfectly shaped bottle with a spout and a glass
Yeah, like
stopper.
it's that energy that to find that drive to make you do this on your weekend to feel like you're your colleagues and you're in this together and has nothing to do with getting paid. It's something that you love to do. That's amazing.
True passion project.
So did you win?
I don't think I won packaging. I think you know what's interesting. I don't know if you remember this, but that year, I forget who made this design, but it was totally insane. It was a snake in the grass. So it was a
I don't
tray.
remember that one.
It was a tray covered in astroturf, and there was a projecting snake that came out of it that dispensed hot sauce.
Oh my god. I mean,
And
I could pick. Who would come up with that? There's
I'm
so
just
many
trying to.
names
I'm
in my
trying
head.
to. It could have maybe Steven. I don't know, but
I don't know.
but it was amazing, and I was like, this is true ingenuity,
Yeah.
creativity, insanity at the
That was the
same
thing. It
time.
didn't need to be this polished experience. Like you could do anything you want with it, but everyone got involved.
Everyone got
Everyone
involved.
participated. That kind of camaraderie. I don't think I've seen anywhere else. Honestly, like
No.
that's why I got to grad school and I was like, what we're gonna be at each other's throats now. Like I come from a place where we would just like come up with like house competitions with each other. The hot sauce competition was fun.
That was really, really something. It was. I mean, that's wonderful company culture.
And
I
we
think
also
I miss
like
sorely.
yeah, that was very rare. I would have to say since then, I mean, I don't know. I worked at some like New York magazines that are very like household names of like hip hop and rock music and also nightlife in New York. And we had club nights because it was a nightlife magazine, pop culture and nightlife magazine. So like we it just still wasn't the same. There was something more family like at that space that when we connected with each other.
Same. Even though once I moved on, and I went on to other companies that were not as small as this one. Once again, meeting wonderful friends and made lifelong connections, but the culture was simply just not the same with that like youthful exuberance and abandonment to design.
Yes.
It just doesn't happen anymore,
No.
really.
And I was there a lot longer than you were, and then I was there after you left, a lot longer after you left. I mean, you were there way before me, but um, friends that I made there, people I've learned from at that job. I remember there was this one weekend we worked, and I was cutting like all these cutouts from like quarter-inch foam core of shapes to put in a presentation, and I guess I was just so tired. Like I just went home. I don't remember. And then the next day, there was this artistic director who also taught me so much about how to set up stage, how to make like. We had a Christmas show. He would just. I learned how to do Christmas packaging, like gift packaging, like store level gift packaging from him. I remember he saw it. I left a mess, and he cleaned it up. All I remember the next day, he came up and said, "Listen, you were tired, so you left all this mess. I cleaned it up, but remember to clean up next time." I was so embarrassed, but it wasn't like, why did you leave it behind? It wasn't anything like that. But that was also like, again, goes back to that, like, you treated the space like your own. He didn't say, oh, the junior, whoever, the entry level girl didn't clean it. It's not my job. Because you owned the space. They made you feel like you had access to this amazing place and it was yours. So if someone else didn't clean, you did. And it didn't feel like, oh, I'm doing her job. It was just a very different existence. And it's still rare. I wonder how that evolved over time after I left. But I feel like that was something. I also respond to that kind of teaching much better than, you didn't clean kind of thing.
I wonder.
Like I'm more of a carrot than a stick person. But, those are fond memories for me to remember thinking that, oh, I messed up. And instead of, like, embarrassing me, he actually did something and on the side said, listen, don't forget next time. And that's all it took. Remember last episode we talked about how GATSBY Friday name started?
It was called Champagne Fridays.
Mm-hmm.
we may have touched upon this.
Yeah, we talked about it last episode, but just the idea that I think you were able to do that because coming back to this like friendly environment now, we were all friends.
We were all friends, but also once again, like with the whole concept of Gatsby Fridays at that time, it was all just a bunch of us after work hanging out, talking about art, talking about life, and these were just, I mean, how different life is right now.
Oh my God, it's something else.
Wow, you know,
I mean,
things evolve.
the first time I ever stepped out of the office with you guys was you and the senior designer went to the art show one night. You guys bought chairs or something.
Oh
and
my
and
goodness,
then
yeah.
the next day when you were supposed to pick that up or he was going to get delivered or something like that, and you guys were like, well, we're going to go pick up this chair up in Soho. You guys want to come? And I was like, let's go. And that was the first time I walked through Soho.
So it was a party. It was during the furniture festival that was going on in the city.
Yes, that's usually beginning
That's
of summer, isn't it? It's
that's
like,
a thing.
Yep, furniture fair.
So it's a furniture fair, and all these furniture shops and studios in Soho were exhibiting their work, and Cartel was the name of the studio and / store that was exhibiting work by Philippe Starck. Now, at the time, Philippe Starck made a chair, all plastic molded chair, 2001, big, bright, yellow, molded plastic armchair, huge. And I remember going there with Eric Z, but he decided to buy a chair, like an actual Philippe Starck chair, because he was there and he was signing the furniture.
Oh, it was signed. I
So
remember
it was
that.
signed, and I have a picture of that, which is, well, I gotta look for it tonight. So Eric went on to, he had to pick it up the next day.
But that was the kind of place that it was, you know? You guys would go out the night before, and then when you were going to go pick up a signed chair, you would drag the interns with you, because why not? They're here to learn and experience. Let's show them everything. I think to this day, it's still very unique.
Now, let's move on to our favorite part of this and every episode, our signature cocktail.
What do we have today? For me, when I go back and remember my first job in 2001, clubs used to be divided into house and hip-hop rooms, and I was drinking vodka Red Bulls.
Oh, boy.
And I don't know what kind of vodka it was. That's the, first job out of college drink. But also in 2001, 2002, we were all drinking vodka Red Bull. There were these stories about, like, people getting sick in Europe, and parents were like, don't drink it that way. One is an upper, the other one's a downer, kind of like, you can't have them in both together, kind of like conversations. I remember that, but I can't even think about that now. When I think about Red Bull, like, I just, like, quiver. It's not good. So that's not a very Gatsby cocktail. But I do want to go back to those Champagne Fridays, which is how this entire show kind of started, that has its, like, little tips of its roots down there. So why don't you come up and tell me a champagne way to celebrate the first job back in early 2000s?
So what we were thinking of when we were putting this cocktail together, we wanted, of course, a champagne cocktail, as you know, and we were trying to figure out how to create that bridge between what that experience was, youthful naivete, freshness, first jobs, what you were drinking back then.
Infinite possibilities.
All these huge possibilities of youth and being young, right? And what we wanted to do is see what a modern day interpretation of that concept would be. Maintaining the champagne cocktail, but calling it Juventus, which is Latin for youth.
Oh, I like that. That's exciting.
So how you prepare it is 1 part pomegranate juice, 2 parts bubbly, and a slice of lime.
And it's pomegranate because that was the year that the pomegranate juice became really popular.
Palm Wonderful was a very popular drink at the time. And we wanted to bring that part of the history and update it.
I love that. Thank you for hanging with us. For a list of resources mentioned in this episode, hop onto our site, GATSBYFridays.com.
You can find the recipe for Juventus on our website, GATSBYFridays.com.
For show notes, if you want to leave a comment, suggest a topic, get us on our site.
Don't forget to rate us and give us 5 stars and write a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps and get us in front of more ears and build our audience. If you're a Spotify person, make sure you follow Gatsby Fridays.
Or follow us on Instagram at Gatsby Fridays.
Stay with us on our next episode. We'll talk about the mentors that help shape our creative practices.
And this is Gatsby Fridays.